12th edition of the eDuck podcast, now with clearer audio. And,
hopefully.
And hopefully a lot better sounding for you guys this week.
Well,
here with Erik Skopil, and we're in Portland.
I want to communicate my deepest sympathy for Robby and his beloved computer, which is now no more.
Yeah.
We're again without his computer, using his girlfriend's computer. So hopefully this works out just as well.
Yeah, no, hey, it's got a GarageBand, it's got everything we need, so it's a little archaic in terms of technology. By that it means like it's probably like a year old, so it makes it obsolete. But no, yeah, my computer is no more, so I'll be taking that thing down into parts and trying to fashion myself a new one, I guess. But we'll see. The nice thing is that we'll have like a couple weeks to get that sorted out, because as we should let you know now, and we'll probably give you a reminder at the end of the show, but next week both Erik and I will be on vacation, hopefully well-earned vacations, and we will not be having a podcast next week.
No, and actually we will be spending the time. Hopefully you've recognized we have a new graphic here on the podcast.
Yeah.
If this works out, Steve was kind enough to kind of wrangle this thing together, more specific to the podcast, not the old eDuck logo. So we've got that, and we're hoping over the course of that 1 week break that we will be able to put photos of ourselves and kind of even step up the game further.
Exactly, yeah. It's all about presentation and branding. So we're going to be...
And we're narcissists, and we like to see our faces everywhere. So.
Exactly, and we want you to see our faces everywhere. So, but so now we are...
What, 3 months. We're 3 months in right now into our podcast, so I want to just kind of highlight that this is the 12th podcast, which means we are 3 months in because we've been doing it one per week.
Yeah.
So cheers to that.
All right.
We're tapping our water bottles together.
Yeah, I'm liking that. So yeah, 3 months. You actually caught that before. That never registered. So there's that, and we're inside. I think we're around 40 days. 42 days.
42 or 41 days. 42 days, I think.
Yeah.
It is.
So until Oregon faces off against Big Bad Nickel State.
The Big Bad Nickel State.
I'm just going to continually be making jokes about that the entire time. No offense to Nickel State, but
now
let's be honest.
You're going to feel really silly when they pull the upset of the century and beat Oregon.
And make off with a hefty paycheck, I'm sure. That would be, you know what, that's got to be like the best thing to happen at college football, is when a team that gets paid to come out ends up ends up upsetting the team that brought him out there.
We're not really predicting that, but I think that would be kind of interesting.
I think a lot of I think our message boards would explode, honestly, with just a bunch of...
Frankly, the message boards will explode.
Fire Helfrich.
The message boards will explode if that game's like within 9 touchdowns, probably.
Probably. The Ducks didn't put enough effort out there to ram it down.
If it's not 63-0 at halftime, I think people are going to be disappointed.
Yeah. And if Thomas Tyner doesn't have 4 touchdowns in the second half during garbage time. So, and speaking of which, a few of the players are back. So that's
a number of the players have been back.
That's cool.
And it was nice. Steve was able to make it over to practice. Came all the way down from the Portland area on Thursday and was able to grab some players post practice for some interviews. I think that was the first opportunity anybody from the media has had to talk to some of the players after summer workouts. So that was kind of a nice glimpse into that. And of course, now we're only a couple of weeks now from the beginning of fall camp, which starts August 5th. So we really are closing in here, and we'll have a lot more coverage when that begins. Again, August 5th, I believe, is the first day, at least the first day that the media is involved.
Yeah.
But it was nice to be able to see, kind of get some video of the guys and see how their bodies have changed. Physically, I think Mariota again looks, even since spring, looks like he's
bulked up. Definitely looks bulked up.
And of course said all the right things in the interview. Had just gotten back from the Peyton Manning quarterback camp, and was pretty hyped up on that, and got an opportunity to compete with some of the great some of the better quarterbacks out there in the country as well. With obviously the Mannings have quite the pedigree there, so obviously a great experience for him. I think it's
and he managed to get out of bed every morning, unlike other quarterbacks apparently. So
I think Bob Clark of the Register Guard tossed a question about that out there, and he kind of laughed it off, as he probably should have.
Yeah, he probably didn't want to toe the line, but that would have been great if Bob would have got him one-on-one.
But so check those videos out. Those will be on the website. Again, Steve, I think, grabbed 4 players Mariota Ifo, Derek
Derek
Malone,
Malone.
and Hronis Grasu.
Yeah.
So those are up on the website, and if not, you can check out Steve's YouTube channel where he has those interviews as well as a lot of stuff from the past.
Yeah. There's a lot of great content, and that's the fun part. Is now we're getting back to the point where with fall camp coming up in a couple of weeks, we're gonna have a lot more of an insight into just how these guys are feeling, and a lot of the younger guys too. That seemed to be kind of the topic of conversation was how are the younger guys
Yeah.
progressing over the summer, how they're kind of coming together within the offense and the defense, and just trying to find that team chemistry and really try to get used to the Oregon system. And it sounds like there's a lot of the players are giving a lot of encouraging remarks. I know that Mariota actually talked a little bit about someone asked him about Tyner, and said that he was progressing well, and that it
But
sounds like a lot of
he
these
was
kids are
rather
getting used to it.
tight-lipped about that. I think that's something, maybe a testament to Marcus and his composure in terms of answering those questions. Something he's probably grown in, but he didn't give a whole lot away. Didn't talk a
No,
lot about, and part of it's probably you can't take a whole lot away from these essentially conditioning and 7-on-7 touch footballs sessions they've been having once every couple of days. But uh, I think the other player that was mentioned a lot was Taronde.
yeah,
And I don't know if it's pronounced Prevo or Previtt because Ifo pronounced it Previtt, so that's one of those name things. We never know how these names are pronounced until ESPN botches it and then writes a retraction.
exactly. So we're just gonna have to wait for that
We're gonna have to wait
during
till
the
it's
season
pronounced Prevo and then Prevote and then Pravote,
until
and then they.
Reese Davis botches it, and we'll finally know. It was like, well, and that was kind of the funny thing was learning these some of these kids' names like last year. Uh, and I've still butchered it, but learning Marcus's last name and
Mariota.
yeah, having Big Dave Wilford coming around and explaining to everybody this is how you pronounce the last name, like during the first game of the season while everybody's kind of writing, and you got a bunch of sports writers going, wait, how do you pronounce that last name again? Wait, how did? So that was. So yeah, learning these guys' names is like kind of a challenge in itself.
Well, I will say you steered me wrong with Arian Spring's name because I did lead off with how's it going, Arian, and he corrected me.
See, but he gave me like two different versions. So
So he doesn't even know how to pronounce his name. Is that what you're saying? We should be careful.
no, I'm sure he does. I'm just I think maybe I just need to clean out my ears. So, but we're gonna jump kind of into this. Is gonna be kind of a heavy recruiting, I guess,
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah. Well, like last week, there were some award watch lists released, which Robby will go over.
Yeah.
We can discuss a little bit of that, but not a whole lot going on. Obviously, right now we're okay, like I said, a couple of weeks away from the beginning of fall camp, so the actual team and how they're progressing, that kind of information will really pick up there in a couple of weeks. But for right now, we're kind of left with kind of speculating, and a lot of these we've done a lot of
I thought we didn't
NCAA
speculate.
video. We don't speculate. You're right. We don't. My apologies. We don't speculate. But we've discussed some of like the NCAA football rankings. One of the things I guess is interesting. We don't need to talk about this really at all. But the NCAA EA Sports has lost the rights
I was
to
just
the
thinking about
NCAA,
that. Yeah.
which is which has very little effect on Oregon. But for those gamer fans out there, would be really interesting to see how that plays out.
End of an era, actually. I've always been a big fan of that game and the way they've been able to kind of
I don't know
the gameplay every year.
I don't know exactly. It's been at least 12 years, I think, since they picked up the rights initially. I think it was right around the turn of the century.
I remember I had
I know Madden
2002, which was the last one they had. Not the one Harrington was on, but the last time Harrington was in the game.
Was in the game, yeah. Well, I know
I know that
Madden.
one.
I think was the first Madden game EA Sports did. I think at least for the N64 console was Madden 64, and it wasn't in 1964. It was I believe it was 1998. Was Madden 64? I still have the copy at home.
How great would that have been? It had like retro rosters from back in the NFL,
64.
AFL days.
Yeah.
Have Bart Starr back there under center.
Well, they
for
do
the
that
Packers.
a little bit now, but yeah, that's probably a digression we don't need to go down. But,
That's true.
But that's one of those kind of strange stories this week, and maybe a little bit alarming or surprising. You're kind of hopeful that they'll continue to somebody will at least be putting out a college football game in the future.
Well, and I heard that like I guess individual schools or the conferences or something can work out deals to have games made. They could still work that out. I guess it's just like they can't use the NCAA. It's not going to be like the NCAA backed version. So it's kind of weird how that is, and maybe 2K steps up because 2K is really the only big sports gamer out there that could come in and essentially just make that a seamless transition. I know that they've done that with other titles before, and I mean they're doing it with for wrestling fans out there who like those games, they took over the wrestling stuff for this year. So if 2K comes in, I think that would be really fun, especially given how well they make the NBA games. And
Sure.
so anyway, enough about gaming.
Aimless
I guess.
gaming ramblings.
So
Yeah.
10 minutes in, we'll get you to some real football news here. We'll quickly go over the awards watch list.
Yeah.
Just a couple highlighted. D'Anthony Thomas up for the Walter Camp and the Doak Walker Award on the watch list.
Doak Walker. So that I guess that means that they perceive him as a running back then.
Yes, and I think and also it probably lends a little bit to what they're classifying him as a position possibly at Oregon this year.
If I'm looking at D'Anthony, I might put him on the Biletnikoff and the Walker because he's so versatile, and we really don't know what his role is going to be. So I might hedge my bets a little
camp
bit
too. So that's the all around.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that that shows how versatile and how much he's recognized as being versatile.
That'll be one thing that will be interesting to see. If he puts up a lot of all-purpose yards, do we consider him to be a wide receiver or running back? I don't know how you do that. It's kind of one of those things, like, and this is a strange analogy, but when you see Academy Awards or Golden Globes or whatever, it's the best leading actor and then supporting actor. Well, where do and I don't even know how they figured that out, but it's one of those things kind of similar with D'Anthony here, is that is he a running back? Is he a receiver? So, and how do you figure that out? And is that going to hinder him winning some of those awards, or if he has this breakout season? And
well, and also where essentially we saw last year with Kenyon, the amount of playing time he had and being yanked from the game so early possibly did have an effect on the fact that Monty Ball beat him for that award last year.
We talked about that last week, yeah.
So this year, you're right. It's not going to be him getting yanked out of the game early. I don't think it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be, are they going to run him more at running back as a wide receiver? Well, and that's because, in my opinion, I view D'Anthony more as a wide receiver. Just because of how effective he can be in that position, and the fact that he can be a little bit more versatile, and they can do more things with him there. And he's made quite a big impact there. And then running back, it's just that Oregon's so stacked with their running back core now. Again, we talked last week how good the upside for this Oregon running back core is going to be in the future. D'Anthony really doesn't need to be carrying the ball all that much when you've got guys like Marshall. If Tyner works out, then you can almost use D'Anthony more exclusively as a wide receiver.
It will be interesting to see, though, if he goes out there and has over 2,000 yards all-purpose, which I think he'll do again, and then maybe 2,000 yards from scrimmage, and you talk about maybe a 1,000 receiving, 1,000 rushing, and that might be a little bit of that might be pretty extreme. But if he were to have a year like that, where he's so versatile and he's doing so much both receiving and running the football, does somebody who runs for, say, 1,800 yards, or I'm trying to think of some of those running back out there. Alabama's got a couple of guys that are really highly regarded. There's even other good running backs in the conference. Look at Kadeem Carey at Arizona.
Yeah, well, and there was 9 running backs on the watch list from the Pac-12. Storm Woods from Oregon State, one of them. D'Anthony's not alone in the company of great running backs in the Pac-12.
Absolutely
he's
not.
Definitely towards the top.
I am curious to see how, because he's kind of playing a different role at Oregon. It will be interesting to see how they approach him, and if that hinders his success at all with trying to win one of those awards.
Well, and I wonder how much to those players, because the funny thing is if you ask any of the Oregon players, and this is just I'd almost imagine this is the same at every single college. Every single player.
Yeah.
You ask them about an award. It's not about the award. It's about the team.
Absolutely.
So they're not going to say, even if they really want it, they're not going to say it out loud. But if D'Anthony wants, how much does D'Anthony really want that award? Because if you talk to him in an interview, and both you and I have had the chance to interview him before, he just seems very kind of nonchalant in his not in a bad way. He's just kind of like, I love living life.
He's
I love
all about
playing
having
football.
fun with his teammates and making big plays.
Exactly. Yeah. I think last year
that's kind of the script right there.
Yeah, it was after the Civil War last year. He's sitting there, I think, eating gummy bears while everybody's interviewing him, and he's just kind of having a grand old time.
Yeah.
And so, how much does he really care all that much, or does he just want to go out there and play football? And he
loves his dog Daisy, though. If anybody follows him on Twitter, that's actually probably 80%. He's in all caps, and he loves his dogs. So, other awards.
Oh, that's what I had. That's
okay.
what I wanted to touch on this week, which is those. And Marcus, obviously, with Walter Camp as well, obviously being up there. And I read an article that was funny because I think he's on obviously he's on the top quarterback. It's at O'Brien, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Davy O'Brien
Yep.
Award. So he's up there, and I read an article like. I wish I could give attribution because I can't remember the dang name. I think it was an SB Nation article or
Okay.
something, but it was they they compared Manziel and Mariota's numbers, which I know was done a lot last year, but they're just looking towards the future. Was Marcus underrated considering the fact that Manziel just got a lot of love because they said, yeah, he played in the SEC and he beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa, so he became the media darling. Everybody wanted to talk about him. Marcus kind of fell, under the radar if anything when comparing the two. So, you know, is that going to be a little bit of a chip on his shoulder? It doesn't seem like it. Doesn't seem like he's that type of
I don't.
player.
Yeah, I don't think he
But
approaches things that way.
I think with him getting that kind of experience at the Manning camp, just learning and talking to kind of elder quarterbacks who've been around and who know
He
exactly
noted
what they're doing.
he noted AJ McCarron a couple of times, the
Yeah,
quarterback at Alabama, who's probably a good role model considering
very
the
good.
success he's had there.
Well, and McCarron's also a guy who does the right things with the media as well.
Mm-hmm.
As you've seen in the last week, yeah, there's been subtle, undercut shots at Manziel, but he even says he's not the type of a party quarterback or anything like that. He's just focused on going out there and winning the game.
Well,
And
do you need to go
Marcus
when
does the
you need
same.
to go party when you've got that when your girlfriend's the
Catherine Webb.
Catherine Webb. Yeah, I
Yeah,
couldn't remember her name.
yeah. Well, and that was the funny thing. He wasn't at the ESPYS. She was. She was the
Did she win something for that for
no.
her appearance in the national championship game?
Yeah, the Brent Musburger Love Award. Uh, no, that was she was like some interviewer or something like that.
Gotcha.
But hey, you know what? If you get noticed by Brent Musburger on national TV, it turns into a career for some people. So that's going to be my goal next year: is just to get noticed by Brent Musburger on national television.
Well,
Out there on the
I don't.
sidelines.
I'm not sure you'll have as much success as Catherine.
No, I'm missing. I'm missing
Subtle
some key
features.
attributes.
Subtle features.
But
Anyway,
so yeah, so that was kind of your watch list little wrap up there.
mm-hmm.
Obviously, as and that's the funny thing is it's called a watch list for a reason. These are kids that had an impact last year. You don't know if there's going to be a sophomore slump, so to speak, with a few of these kids, or
Mm-hmm.
just a bad year, and someone almost every year you're going to see someone come out of the woodwork that no one saw coming. That's going to be up there. That it wasn't on the watch list, and that's going to be eligible for the award at the end of the season.
Michael James, his first year at Oregon was one of those guys. I mean,
Yeah, 'cause
total unknown, was a redshirt freshman, and then was one of the I believe a finalist for the Doak Walker.
yeah, and he was, and that was the funny thing was seeing how much better he got over the season. I remember being at that Washington game up in Seattle and him busting off like a 40-yard touchdown run or
Yeah.
45-yard touchdown run. And that was kind of like, oh wow, this kid is something, So, and that's almost assuredly going to happen with some kid at another school sometime this season. But so let's dive into some recruiting and kind of talk.
Let's
there was
do it.
no big splash Royce Freeman
There was-
thing this week, but a lot of people
Well,
still
well-
love talking about Royce on our
I
message boards.
I want to ask you though, or I guess last week after the podcast, I asked you who did you think. And I wish we had we could do like a
Yeah.
flashback. But we weren't recording this. This is just a off the record conversation. I asked you who you thought would be the next Oregon commitment, and I want to know if that has changed at all in lieu of anything that you heard this week. And you said I want to say you said Metro McGraw.
Yes, and I prefaced that by saying that is completely if he does end up deciding during the summer, because he even made it known that he might not. He's consulting with his coach. He's close with his coach. His coach might deem that not the best time for him and to maybe wait it out. Obviously, if you commit in August, that's still extremely early.
Well, it's interesting
So-
that not to hold up
Go-
this part,
go
but it's
for it.
interesting that the coach would tell him maybe to hold off on it. Don't you think his high school coach would want him to be entirely focused on the season rather than having the recruiting part kind of potentially distract him?
You would think so, but at the same time, there's probably a relationship dynamic there where the coach knows that the coach probably has a pretty good idea what's going on inside Mitrell's head, and probably is just it sounds like, and according to Mitrell, this is what it sounds like. The coach really is looking out for his best interests and doesn't
Oh, that's good to hear.
he doesn't want to doesn't want to put too much pressure on him. And obviously if you're deciding in August, that close, you're obviously in camp doing all that stuff. He wants to make sure that he's making the right decisions with visits and everything. So he talked about going to Florida State, and if it is too much of a unknown, like he said, one has to be clearly ahead of the other out of the three schools. And if it's not, then it probably is a good thing that he's going to hold off until after the season to worry about that again. And that's kind of the nice thing about having that little 2-month window in between the end of the season and when you actually have to, put your name on the dotted line. But
But
so
has your opinion changed?
a little bit, one kid I wanted to bring up, and this is something that a lot of our posters on eDuck did bring up. Nick Kurtz, a wide receiver,
Yes, junior college wide
junior
receiver.
college wide receiver. This guy, great, just great skill set,
Hmm.
and it sounds like he's very very high on Oregon. I have not gotten the pleasure of talking to him yet, so I'm not going to go out there and say, yeah, he's definitely coming or anything like that. But just watching his tape, Oregon would love to have a guy like this. He's dangerous in the open field. He's got extremely quick feet that allow him to change direction almost on just on cue, just whenever he
Hmm.
wants. Because if you watch him in the open field, he's having DBs. They're running backwards, turning their
Yeah.
backs, trying to follow him, and he's really good at changing direction. And he makes some of these catches. Just his athleticism, going up, he makes hard catches look easy for
Very,
a
very
lot of that
tall,
video.
long body. Kind of probably if he does end up at Oregon, will be probably the I think someone you can compare him to is Lavoisier Tuine,
Yeah,
who I believe just signed a contract with the Dallas Cowboys. I believe I saw that somewhere on the Twitter.
on the tweeter.
Yeah, I think someone tweeted it about it. But
But
I think there's similarities there physically between the two.
yeah, and then the nice thing about Kurtz too is if you watch the video, you'll see that he's not a guy that's particularly easy to bring down. He doesn't set the world on fire with his speed, from what I saw, but he's just that guy who knows the right spot to hit on the
Yeah.
field. And when he catches the ball, and if he gets just even a little bit of green in front of him, he's going to pick up extra yards just based off of his ability
I
to
I
make the
I,
cornerback or safety miss.
I think the Ducks wide receiving core, and you can chime in on this if you want as well, is probably looking for a little bit more variety in terms of the body type at this point in time. I think the only receiver on the entire team right now who kind of physically resembles Kurtz is Dwayne Stanford,
Right.
who's had a great had showed a lot of flashes of potential this last year as a freshman. But other than that, there's a lot of guys who are pretty undersized.
Yeah. You
Braylon
look at
Addison and Josh Huff. I don't think either of them are 6 feet tall.
no
Um,
Keenan Lowe.
Keenan Lowe is not
No.
particularly tall. Daryl Hawkins is a taller guy, but he's in his last year of eligibility now.
Hmm.
So I think there might be kind of they need some on the outside there. They might be looking for some bigger frames to throw to. Obviously, they've got some great tight ends going forward, but
Right, but
that's a
when you look
different.
at the guys like deep threats like Devin Allen,
Hmm.
who's coming in, and then you got Darren Carrington, who's a taller, lankier body,
Yeah,
great athleticism. Allen, not super tall, but just dangerous with his speed.
sure.
That's what sold Oregon
Yeah,
on him.
but I think the way Marcus is able to throw the ball in the red zone,
Hmm.
which hasn't been something that we've seen a lot of. Usually, Oregon's been very much a run heavy team when they get the ball, within about the top, 10, 15 yard line. I think it could be very advantageous to have some of those 6'6", 6'5" guys on the outside like Stanford and Kurtz to go throw the ball up to.
Yeah, because
Along
Colt
with
Lyerla's
yeah,
not going to be open every play.
he might be. He probably doesn't need to be.
But I mean, you want those big bodies. That was a nice thing about having the big tight ends, Ed Dixon, David Paulson, was when you got into those short yard situations. Those were guys that could run just straight routes right up straight go routes right up there, and you
Sure.
could just kind of lob it up, and you have a pretty good chance coming out with a touchdown there. You've got Colt Lyerla there. You've got, like you said, they're looking at some solid tight ends. Henry Mondu, one of them, Trevor Wood,
Hmm.
another one of them out of Arizona. Both those guys are bigger dudes. Mondu's 6'5". Just he
Yeah.
looks like a tank in person. Wide receiver, I think they like the flexibility of having different sizes on the wide receiver on that line, and considering that they've had so much success within that system
Yeah.
with guys like DeAnthony, guys like Keenan Lowe,
Hmm.
even far back, he didn't have a huge impact, but there were times where I know it's like Aaron Pflugrad, who was
Sure.
a smaller wide receiver, was able to make plays.
Underneath, yeah.
And so I think with Oregon's system, and granted, I I think Helfrich is probably going to implement a little bit more of the passing game heading into this season. I think that's something that the Ducks could use a lot more to their advantage. But you're right; they need a guy like Lavoisier Tune, who is just a very big target that you could throw out there, and and not only that, big frame so that he was able to lumber forward, and carry a guy for a couple yards and get those extra yards. That's kind of what Kurtz is. You watch his tape, he'll catch on he'll come back, catch the ball, pivot, turn, guys right there ready to hit him on the sideline, and he'll make a side step, throw him off, and pick up another couple of yards. So, but then of course you're looking at that, and then you're looking at a guy like Speedy Noel who put Oregon into his top five.
That's a big development potentially.
Yeah, and which was interesting because Noel's been relatively quiet, in terms of just giving interviews.
Yeah.
Just he's a tough dude to get a hold of.
Did you try to talk to him at the opening? Because at that point, we probably didn't even consider him a target.
No, because Oregon wasn't so much on his radar, and in talking with some of the national guys, it just didn't seem like it. So something's developed there, and that's because Oregon wasn't in his picture. He's had lists where he was top 3, top 4, and then he'll add schools in as
Yeah.
he's kind of an interesting recruit in that aspect of he's willing to add to his list. It's not okay, I'm cutting it down and I'm taking all you guys out. It's oh well, now Oregon's interested in me. Okay, I'll throw them in. Oh, USC's interested in me. I'll throw them
Well,
in.
Noel, for those who aren't familiar, was almost set the spark record for
1 point off. Yeah,
was very, very close and showed incredible athleticism at the opening. Ran a 4.440. His vertical was like 45 inches, I think. Am I wrong on that?
I think it was
4. I mean,
and a half.
I mean, it was
something
just
like that.
almost
I had it listed on
unbelievable for
the
somebody to
story
have
there,
those
yeah.
type of so. This is a guy who, and Speedy obviously, I think is a nickname. I think I forget his real name.
It's Devontae.
Devontae.
Devontae Noel.
But that's an apt nickname to describe him. Obviously, very, very fast and shows great athleticism.
I mean, he ran away with the Spark title.
A guy who, if Oregon truly is in the top 5 there, maybe they get an official visit, and then who knows?
Well, and that's the nice thing is he's now a wild card in
Yeah.
my opinion in terms of because he's one of those Southeast kids. He comes out of Louisiana, out of New Orleans. Obviously,
Has a
Oregon's
relationship with Latrobe McGraw.
right, and Oregon's making a lot of great progress there, and Oregon has been able to make a dent in the Southeast recently. And so, I got it here. Even though he's 5'10" and a half, 181.
Yeah.
And then he had a 4.440, 3.94 shuttle time, 45.3 inch vertical.
I thought it was 45. Yeah,
So,
that's incredible.
So you were pretty dang good. You were right on. So
That's pretty incredible.
and that's the thing is that a lot of people are excited just out of his pure athleticism. The funny thing is he plays at Edna Carr, the high school he
Yeah.
attends. He's a quarterback, and so a lot of people, there was a question on the message board earlier this week about, well, would he be playing or would he be doing track and field, because that would give Oregon a little bit more of an advantage to recruit him to, present those options.
Sure.
And then also, why is he, because star ratings and where position ratings are, some people like to, just talk about, well, why is this kid lower than this kid, and why does Scout do things the way they do?
Yeah.
And just in reading on him, doing some homework on Speedy, he's still learning that position. He's still learning how to be a wide receiver. He's still learning how to be that effective slot wide receiver who runs the correct routes, knows exactly where to be with his timing, and he's even admitted that. And so he said, he wants to focus full on, just becoming the best wide receiver he can be. So I think that's why you're not hearing things about him possibly running track, even though he would be a lethal track athlete.
Sure.
And you're not hearing a ton of why he's not at the top of Scout's rankings,
Yeah.
despite the fact that athletically he's probably the best athlete in the nation.
Based on those,
with-
based on those numbers,
Yeah.
it's hard to argue.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the thing is just pure athleticism doesn't translate to great football player. And I
Sure.
think a lot of people know that. It's just, there's a learning curve. And when guys have that kind of size and they realize, okay, I'm not going to be able to play quarterback at the next level, you're opening up a new can of worms by having them play a different position.
You talked a little bit about him playing quarterback in high school, but Oregon has had tremendous success in in that transition period from moving guys from quarterback to wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about Josh Huff was a guy who did that. It'll be interesting to see how if they use that as a selling point.
It will be.
And I think really what could be telling with Noel, and just in terms of this recruiting class for wide receivers, I think he's probably, Micaiah Quick's another guy we've talked about. He doesn't have an Oregon offer. I think there's concerns about academics there, perhaps.
And he's another guy who's not quite 6 foot.
Yeah, similar, I think, a little bit to Noel.
Yeah.
But for Matt Lubick in his first year as wide receivers coach, and obviously we have the former wide receivers coach Scott Frost on staff, so that should help things.
Oh yeah.
This could be the big recruit for him that kind of announces his presence as a recruiter. We know I think he was the top wide receiver coach in the country last year by some publication.
Oh yeah, for what he was
Um,
able to do, turning the Duke program around,
sure.
having I think it was three separate 1,000-yard receivers or
Hmm.
something like that. It was, and that's what got people excited about him coming out to Oregon, was because you don't think of Duke. Duke as a football team.
Duke
I
has a
don't.
football team, do they?
Yeah. So first off, Duke has a football team. Second off, I don't think in my entire lifetime of watching college football they've been really any good. They've gotten better over the last couple of years, but for the most part, they were just the walking mat of the ACC. So you've got a guy who goes in there, turns it around. He was at Colorado State before that, so he's got
In
good
Arizona
connections.
State, he's been everywhere.
Yeah, so he's got great connections all over the country, and
Hmm.
that's what was appealing to Oregon was this guy, and he immediately, preferred walk on in Johnson,
Jonathan Johnson,
Jonathan Johnson.
who
Yes, thank you.
I told you I don't think will be coming this year.
Right, but he was able to at least he gets
That
named
connection.
and he has that connection, and obviously he gets someone right on Oregon's radar right away. Even if he doesn't end up coming here, he was able to show that he was able to have that kind of an impact early on. I think his reputation as it's grown is going to he's going to land that big recruit. If it's Noel, Oregon fans are going to be ecstatic. But if not, he's going to at some point because there's a slew of wide receivers. Obviously Quick is a big 5-star wide receiver. He was out at the opening. He looked good. You got I think Monte Nicholson was another guy that they're looking at who can kind of go both ways. Um,
You're talking about offense, defense, correct?
yeah, yeah. So so yeah, moving on. But yeah, no, he can go. Yeah, he can
Safety,
kind of
wide
play
receiver. Uh-huh.
safety, a wide receiver type, and the fact that that Lubick's been on the one recruiting him, that kind of lends the fact that
That's right.
Oregon would like him. So yeah, so the wide receiver position is going to be interesting to watch going forward because we already kind of know
Yeah.
what they're looking for defensive backs.
Running backs,
We know what they're
quarterbacks.
looking for in quarterbacks, running backs, but the tricky ones are kind of that the linebacker spots, defensive ends. It seem to be making a little bit more progress there,
Yeah.
and so those are the kind of the up in the air questions as they try to build upon this recruiting class because. Quite frankly, they've already put together a very solid one that a lot of people are impressed with already, even
Yeah.
though there's 8 guys.
Hmm.
And these guys seem to fit that mold. And of course, obviously, we say it every week: Buda Baker, Matrell McGraw, possibly filling out that defensive back class. Then all of a sudden, you're looking at okay, linebackers. What are they going to be able to do? A kid that they talk that I've seen, Jimmy Swain out of
Uh-huh.
Missouri, who when he said he was talking about Pelham. I don't know if I've mentioned it on the show before, but Pelham went out and visited him because he saw something in him and got an offer from Oregon. And he said, I didn't even know Oregon recruited out here. So Swain's a guy who, and I talked to Greg Powers about him, and Greg Powers spoke very highly of Swain
He
and his
covers
ability.
recruiting for the
The
Midlands.
Midlands, yeah. So and out of he's out of Lee Summit, Missouri, 6'3", 219, and he
Good size.
likes Oregon, and he's got a great skill set. There's a couple things to work on, but the thing is he plays explosively, and he's really great at chasing down the ball. He just kind of has that motor, that the high motor cliche, but he does have that, and he's fantastic at tracking down the quarterback or whoever has the ball down the field, no matter where it is, no matter how far he's got to go. So it's kind of fun looking at recruiting now, and this is always the fun part of it. Is now you're in the heat of the summer. A lot of these kids are trying to do get their kicks in before they go back to
Sure.
football and focus on it. And now you're looking at okay, now where's Oregon going to focus?
Yeah.
What they've already taken care of a lot of stuff. Now they need to focus somewhere else. One of the on the defensive end, Brandon Huffman reported earlier this week. Matt Dickerson. Sorry, I almost mispronounced his last name, but Dickerson, 6'5", 275 out of San Mateo, and he holds an Oregon offer. Has a ton of offers. Said the Pac-12 is recruiting him very very hard, and he didn't even mention specific schools. He just said the Pac-12 schools are the ones recruiting me the hardest. Sounds like he's going to stay out in Pac-12 territory right now. He's been playing AAU basketball during the summer, so not a ton in terms of just like visits and stuff. But he did say he wants to come out and visit Oregon and take an official there because he's not going to be able to have a chance to take an unofficial.
Yeah.
So there's another kid that defensive end wise, him and like Jalen Jelks out of Arizona,
Yeah.
another kid that if Oregon could possibly snag those two, you get a couple of West Coast or I guess Arizona's tech. I don't know what
We'll
Arizona's
call it
is.
West Coast.
Yeah, so West Coast ish kids that would boost the defensive end line. And then, obviously we don't know with Prevost, he might be moving to linebacker there.
Listed as linebacker on the
So,
roster.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it would be nice to get possibly a couple of defensive ends out of this class that will be able to kind of boost that line going forward, especially when you got a big defensive tackle in Tui Tulia coming in as well, and they could possibly do a little bit more work there as well. So
It's that drop end position which Deion Jordan played this last year. It's going to be interesting to see how that evolves and if it kind of stays the same. I know Alioti talked about it in the spring and how that kind of position will change depending upon who's playing it. But what kind of body are they looking at? I thought Taradny was a really good candidate to play that position if he put on some weight. Maybe that's why they're starting him at the linebacker is to kind of get his weight up. There's a couple pictures of him on Twitter. You can go follow him on Twitter if you have a Twitter.
yeah, get a Twitter.
He looks get a Twitter and follow
Yeah.
Robby and I, and then follow Taradny.
Yeah, exactly.
In that order. but he still looks a little slight of frame. I think he's listed at 6'3", 214. Probably want to see him playing closer to 230.
Yeah,
But you look at the guys who the depth chart there: Tony Washington, Christian French, Cody Carragher. I think are that's kind of the top. Those are the three guys playing that position right now. It will be interesting to see. All those guys are taller, 6'5", 6'6", 250, 260. Will be interesting to see who in this class they target to play that position, if anybody. Looking at the frames on some of the guys they're recruiting, is there anybody that to you kind of sticks out and goes, hey, that guy fits the mold of those type of players?
well, offensively there is.
Okay.
So that's actually a nice little segue. Is Sam Jones?
Yeah.
A kid out of Colorado. I talked to him earlier this week, and he's picking up some interest from the SEC. And he's a 6'5", 275 offensive lineman.
Sounds like Jake Fisher, Tyler Johnstone.
That's your Oregon mold. A lot of people on our message boards. The thing I like is people go, "Oh, yep, prototypical Greatwood."
Yeah.
And a lot
Comes
there
in
a lot of
tall and
comparisons to
lean, puts
Cameron
on weight, and Cameron Hunt.
Yeah, Cameron Hunt. A lot of comparisons there, and just kind of looking at their games and how their techniques, and that was kind of the fun thing about going on eDuck, and kudos to those of you guys who are listening who participate in the eDuck forums and stuff. There was just a lot of great, intelligent conversation about the technique of an offensive lineman and talking about what is in relation to Sam Jones and Cameron Hunt's game, and that was really fun to read this week.
And for those unfamiliar with the boards, if you're not an eDuck subscriber, first off, go get a subscription.
Yes.
Secondly, Tail Feathers is the board where we have that recruiting discussion. It takes place there. Robby will chime in with updates, and
So will you.
And so will I if I have any. Sometimes, very rarely. But a lot of like he said, a lot of intelligent discussion, a lot of very knowledgeable people discussing recruits, which is fun. And something definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, and so, but back to Jones, he's narrowed his list down, and could be 4, could be 5. He has 4 solid, but again, he's being from Colorado.
Yeah.
It's kind of like with the Oregon kids. It's like that. Yeah, but if I got that offer from that school I grew up with, that can kind of change things.
Is there a school there for him?
Colorado. He said that
Really?
he's got it down to 4 schools in Oregon, Kansas State, Colorado State. So there's that one in-state school, Arizona State. Then he said he's been talking more to Colorado recently, and he said we'll see what happens there. So to me, that says that there's something there that and he works out with at an academy down there that brings in some pro athletes to kind of teach these kids a little bit more and bring in some old Denver Broncos and stuff like that. So and to kind of give them more of a maybe a little bit more of a tougher workout and more of a knowledgeable experience in terms of just learning how to play the game and play it right. And so, but I got the sense that with Colorado, even though Colorado is the lowest of the lows right now in the Pac-12,
Sure.
they're still I
So
guess the heart wants what it wants is kind of the way to put it. If you grew up with it.
has Colorado offered him yet, or is he just waiting to see where the program is at, or how
I think it's more of a just waiting to see how everything develops
new
with them in terms of just
new
more talking
coach and
and all that.
uh-huh.
Yeah, with Oregon, he does sound very high on Oregon.
Yeah.
He's going to take an official out to Oregon. He said they're going to be the first one, so he doesn't know which game yet.
Okay.
'Cause I did ask him that. He said he doesn't know because he's got two Thursday night games.
Okay.
His entire visiting schedule. He wants to take plenty of official visits, but his deal there is that he only has two Thursday night games, and he doesn't want to risk being missing practice or anything like that to go do any of that. He said he wants to be focused with the team and make a run at state. He says he thinks he owes it to the team to be 100% committed to them. So unless he can make a trip on one of those after those Thursday night games, fly up Friday, stay Saturday, fly home Sunday, he's probably not going to be visiting during the season. But
Okay.
it sounds like with those Thursday games, if there is that opening, Oregon's going to be the first one. And I know that he was very high on Arizona State as well. Those were those two schools when I talked to him before this that seemed to be really pushing on him very hard, and actually Arizona State seemingly was pushing harder. Now Oregon, it seems, that I think also since the focus for Oregon seemingly is going away from DBs and all that, and they're focusing a little bit more in different areas. I think they're going to be putting a little bit more of a push. Greatwood's been talking to him, and also graduate assistant Joe Bernardi's been talking to him. So you got two guys very knowledgeable in that position that are throwing the pitch out there for Jones, and I think that there's a pretty good chance you'll see Jones. Verbally commit to Oregon. In my opinion, I think they have a good shot at it. I can't guarantee that, but I think he's definitely one of those kids that Oregon really wants to boost that offensive line.
I don't know how much insight you have on this right now, and if we didn't discuss talking about this, but I am curious to see. We have Oregon has, I guess technically they could take 24
Mm-hmm.
in this class. We've got 8 already verbally committed. We'll see. Sometimes there's shuffle in
There'll be a
terms of
few during the
people
season,
hold
and
on,
then
but probably more likely they take close to 20. So we're probably right
they had,
under halfway right now in terms of filling out that class.
they had 19 last year.
Maybe we don't have a real pretty clear picture of it, but do you kind of sort of start puzzling in and kind of filling the puzzle with, okay, I think these two guys end up here, and if so, do you kind of have a feel for how Oregon's going to complete the class? Would you feel comfortable maybe projecting a little bit of that?
Well, right now it's just me personally. Still, I will admit that I'm still a year into this job, so
Not
I
to, I
will
hate to
say
put you on
that
the spot, but I wanted to
well,
see.
and I appreciate that because it's one of those things that in August, we're mid July right now, and I can sort of piece together what it's looking like. Obviously, with defensive backs, we've been talking about that forever. Jones, I think, is a strong candidate for the
Okay.
offensive tackle.
Kurz, we just talked about wide
Yeah,
receiver.
and then but the funny thing is that there's always those kids that kind of come out of nowhere at the end of the class.
Sure.
That they end up talking to. I mean, Jake Pisarcik last year, no one knew who the heck that guy was, and then all of a sudden, oh, I'm a Duck. Greatwood went out, talked to him, offered him, he committed. Boom, it would happen that quickly. So I'm leaving it open that there's going to be those couple of wild card kids
Okay.
that are under the radar right now that Oregon's going to pick up, whether it be junior college or whether it be just like an unknown kid on the East Coast, like they had last year, or just some an unknown kid right now. Uh, I'm leaving open a couple of spots in my kind of that puzzle for that. I think you're probably right. You're probably, I would guess, about 21 to 22 kids, because
Okay.
they don't. Last year was supposedly uh, I guess you would say that the class where they don't have to take as much. They didn't, they were supposed to be the low number class,
Yeah.
and so this year they were kind of expecting it to be a little bit of a higher number. But I just, again, looking at Oregon's recruiting practices over the past 5 years, I just don't see them even really trying to fill out the class because they just don't need to. So you got Jones on the offensive line, you got Baker and McGraw back there in the defense. Jimmy Swain's another guy that I think is going to be very high on Oregon, and I
Yeah.
think he's got a very good shot. So we'll definitely see what happens there. And then again, it's the wide receivers. Are they going to be able to pull the big one out with Speedy Noel? Are they going to be able to make that impact and get him to come out and visit? And if not, what's next? So that's kind of where I'm at with that and piecing it together.
Yeah.
And then, as I obviously talk more and more to these kids, and the
Well, there's a
get
lot,
more and
lot of
more
information to
access.
gather, I think.
And not only that, I think there's still that they've got to play a senior year. They've got to play 12 more, or 8 9 more games, whatever it is, and then playoffs and all that. And so there's going to be some kids that just, again, they come off the radar. A kid last year, Zach Cunningham, was that
Hmm.
exact type of kid who he was under the radar the entire
Yeah.
year, and all of a
Ended
sudden
up at
Oregon,
Vanderbilt, correct?
yeah, but Oregon put up a big front for him, and they were one of his top three schools there at the end, and
Yeah.
they just weren't able to pull it off. But again, that was a kid who he blew up after his senior season, and he sent out some tape and some coaches. It was Auburn who looked at it and went, "Whoa," and then kind of everyone followed suit. So I leave those open for the sake of it just seems to happen every year. It just seems to happen.
Hmm.
So that's going forward. That's what I'm going to be looking for is just who are going to be those kids that are kind of under the radar right now.
Fair enough. Yeah. No.
Yeah,
I just was curious, and 20 sounds like between 19 and 22 kids, something like that they'll take. So
yeah. I would imagine they try
and
to get a
we've
couple extra this year just
yeah.
because they went low last year by the standards of the last 5 or so years. But they always seem to hover around 20 between 21 23 kids.
And it seems like they've got 8 commitments and perhaps 5 or 6 guys that it looks pretty favorable for at this point in time. Obviously, we talked about it's still July,
Yeah, but what I mean,
so you're looking at maybe they've got 14 or 15 guys we think we could certainly see committing, and then there's maybe 6 or 7 question marks.
yeah, and then you look at again another kid. We talked about Mixon. What
Yeah,
happens with him? What about Casey Tucker?
both
Where's he
5-star
going to be at?
recruits. Yeah.
Yeah, where's he going to be at with Oregon? You go down the list and you see Bryce Dixon, another kid who
Hmm.
it might be a little bit of a long shot right now, but what happens? It's still a long process to go. Jalen Brown, a wide receiver out of Arizona, is another kid. You work through and you see a lot of these kids that are like, oh yeah, no, you could see them possibly committing to Oregon. And there's also that kind of Oregon's done such a good job over the past few years of building up the program. It's almost like, well, why wouldn't you come to Oregon? There's kind of going to be a little bit of an expectation that if they don't pick Oregon, they're kind of spurning them and not doing what's best. So I believe that heading into the season when you're going to hear a little bit more from these players and you're going to start seeing them taking these official
Yeah.
visits. Leith Freck, another kid
Hmm.
that's going to be taking an official, he's going to be on there. He's a kid that I could see definitely coming to Oregon. Um, we'll definitely see because then you get if you get a guy like Freck or if you ended up getting a guy like Tucker or something like that, then
Sure.
all of a sudden you've got a killer offensive line when you mash them up with Crosby there. Definitely that you're definitely making a bigger dent in your recruiting class, just out of quality of players, not quantity. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at recruiting wise right now. It was actually kind of nice getting through there and discussing a lot of names that maybe we don't bring up a lot on this
Yeah,
podcast,
that was something. I would think one of the goals today was,
and just
we hear a lot about, we've said Baker and McGraw, but who are some of those guys that maybe fans have seen an article here or there, but haven't heard their names in a couple of weeks, maybe a couple months. Good to kind of maybe recap that and kind of
yeah.
re-emphasize that these are still guys that Oregon might be looking to take.
Well, and one kid I want to bring up, and he's a 2015 kid, and I usually don't do this because again, that's 2 years away. I'm more interested in the here and now.
Sure.
But I talked to him yesterday. He's a local kid in West Salem. His name's Keegan Ladd. He's wide receiver, 6'3", 185 was what he self-reported to me.
Uh-huh.
He's listed about 6'3", 180 on Scout. He said he's put on a couple pounds. But the only reason I bring him up is that he's been talking, or he went to a few camps. He does a lot of work with Northwest Elite Index, who do a good job of not only getting a lot of notice for Oregon and Washington prospects in the Northwest, getting them noticed here, but getting them noticed outside of here, which
Sure.
is the
Nationally.
goal.
Hmm.
And he talked a little bit about that and the work that a guy like Jordan Johnson's doing over there to help them kind of boost their profiles. Because again, Northwest isn't very it's not football centric,
No.
at least not to the extent of a lot of other regions. So the only reason I bring him up is that when he went to the Oregon camp a
Hmm.
few months ago, he ended up talking to Coach Frost, and Frost said that he liked his skill set and he wants to keep tabs on him. So there's another potential wide receiver later on. Obviously, I think he's going to put on a little bit of weight.
That's
And,
good body set though. I mean,
yeah,
6'3", that's a tall, lanky kid.
yeah,
Um,
and that he's got a decent track. He's a decent track runner. I don't have the number right in front of me, but I got actually a tip from one of our forum members about his performances in track, and he wasn't blowing people away, but also he was pretty solid.
Sub 11 in the 100. Was he a sprinter?
You know what? Actually, let me bring it up right here. I don't think he was. Let's see. He
Because sub 11 is kind
was
of the
ran a 23:25 in the 200 meter. So
that's reasonable.
yeah, they said it was 13th amongst ninth and 10th graders. So again, not blowing people away with his speed or anything, but definitely a kid that's going to be working harder to get better. He even said that in talking to Frost, because Oregon's really the first school to show interest in him face to face. So he said, I'm not going to be picky. I'm not, I want to get offers. I want to keep building on those offers. But his goal is to play D1 football. The fact that Oregon is the first school to kind of express that interest
It's got to be exciting.
says a little bit about the upside of this kid, I think.
Sure.
And so he's going to be improving. The opinion is just whether or not he's going to be the top guy. That is he going to become one of the top in-state prospects, or is he? Or what's going to happen over the next couple of years with him.
Okay.
So just a kid that interested in throw out some good publicity for him. We want to help out the kids here, so uh, you know good for him, and check him out if you get a chance. His highlights are on Scout, so he's got a little bit of sophomore highlights. So check that out, and I think we are pretty dang close to wrapping this thing up. Erik, you got anything you want to add in here?
I'm trying to think on the basketball front if there was much this week. On the baseball front, I know a number of, and I was planning on doing this, but I'll put it up on the. I'll write something for early next week regarding who's returning and who's not returning, who's of the signed commitments, which ones signed their contracts to play minor league baseball. But Jimmy Sherfy, I know, had his first career save, professional save, which was
Hey.
so there's something I didn't have a chance to really check in on Healy or any of those other guys, but just something to bring out. I will have an update sometime next week. And then on the basketball end of things, Felicio continued to impress at the World University Games.
I
There's
saw
more
his final
updates.
stat line. He looked
played-
better as the tournament went on.
Played really, really well. So more updates of that on the Duck Hoops forum on eDuck. Hoping, I think I talked about this last week, and we talked about this last week. Hoping to see more video from those games to kind of flesh out where what he does and how he'll fit into Oregon's offense. Marty, aka M4 Ducks, Marty Martindale, did post an interesting development over on Duck Hoops if you get a chance regarding the son of Arvydas Sabonis, who would be a recruit for next year. A guy who's really doing some
Can he
pretty
shoot
special
the
things.
three?
I haven't got a chance to watch a lot of video. From what I've seen, he's more kind of an interior guy, but I think 6'9", 6'10", still a class of 2015 kid, or 2014, sorry.
Yeah, not quite his daddy's height, but
Yeah, I didn't quite get up to
definitely-
7'3".
Yeah.
But
I love
I think
Sabas.
first name is Demontis. I'm not sure exactly if that's how you pronounce it because I'm not fluent in Lithuanian. But certainly a guy to follow, and I think a guy that will be pretty big nationally. I guess another kind of minor basketball note, Kyle Wiltshire, formerly of Kentucky, also a Portland kid, played high school up here, transferring to Gonzaga, my alma mater.
Hey.
But Oregon was involved there initially, but then received the transfer from Joseph Young and had kind of filled their class up. So I don't think it was a selectivity thing as much as it was we're just going to take whichever one commits first. So Kyle Wiltshire to Gonzaga, not going to be a Duck, will not be playing in the state for his last 2 years of collegiate eligibility.
Yeah, that's a bummer. But,
Yeah.
I mean, at least Oregon has done a good job filling out that class. So I think
Tremendous job, and again, and we talked about last week, and there weren't really any outstanding updates or information coming across this past week, but keep an eye at Duck Hoops for updates on those guys. In the basketball season, we talked about the football season only being 42 days away. Well, the basketball season's also closing in right now.
creeping up.
I think we're like 70 days away or something from the start of practice, so we're not real far away from that. So we're going to get even more updates on those guys and just to kind of see how that roster fills out. Right now they've got 13 guys who plan on being Ducks. There's 11 of them who will almost certainly be playing for the Ducks, but both Joseph Young and Cristiano Felicio still kind of waiting to figure out, are they eligible right now? Are they eligible at all? So just keep tuning into the Duck Hoops. I'm sure some news will break over the next month or two.
Yep. And keep checking in now that, obviously the players are coming in on campus. Keep checking into eDuck for all those videos. Steve's going to be down there. I'm sure Eric's going to be down there filming a few of them.
One other kind of random note is that GoDucks.com did update the roster with pictures of the new recruits. So if you want to see what they look like, I'm not sure if Robby's had a chance to check it out. You can do that. They also update the Duck Hoops roster, and you can check out kind of heights and weights, no photos for the newcomers, but heights and weights and some jersey assignments. So again, check out GoDucks.com for some more roster updates. Nothing real outstanding or mind-blowing, but it's always kind of fun to see what the guys look like, especially some of those guys who maybe were under the radar recruits you don't see a lot of photos of and haven't seen a lot of interviews with.
Right, and you get a little bit of a sense of their background and what they've been able to do if you're not too familiar with the players. If you're trying to get to know them, they do a good job of providing a background.
There are many, been doing. A couple paragraph bios on the roster spots as well in there.
And with Mosley running that place now, I bet those things are just sweet. So
yeah, and I guess if you want, even we won't do too much advertising for GoDucks.com.
No,
apparently we are, but he is. He did write a couple of stories this past week on practice, so he's kind of got, now that he works for the University of Oregon Athletic Department, he might kind of have a step up in terms of what he's able to see. So he's the guy we're checking out as always.
Yep, and so keep checking back for eDuck for obviously the videos of the current players and the newcomers. I'm sure we're going to have videos of that soon, and then keep checking back for recruiting updates. Recruiting never ends, as I found out. So keep checking back. We'll have updates all next week. Just kind of what's going on. We'll be right there if any crucial news breaks. And until then, I guess since it's going to be 2 weeks.
Yep. Reminder that we will not have a podcast next week for those who have short-term memory problems and forgot that we said it earlier on in the podcast.
Yep. Or if you just skip over that part.
Or you just skip over to listen to it later on.
Oh, damn it. They're talking video games again, But, keep checking in. And also, big thanks to, last week, I think, was our second most listened to podcast.
Yeah, I saw that. So, big spike. That was great to see. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, so hopefully we're doing something right, or we just got one really loyal fan that just keeps clicking on that dang button. So
it was me. Sorry.
So, thank you very much. Please continue to give us feedback. We always like improving and hearing back from our listeners. If you want to send us any questions that you want answered on the show, also, you can either find us on eDuck or even tweet at us. Eric's at Erik Skopil on Twitter. I'm at Boydstun eDuck. And if
let's do this on our. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's a good idea. Let's do that. Let's post for. So we'll have 2 weeks for this, but on this post for this particular podcast on the thread, let the listeners / posters ask any questions they have. Yeah. And of those of you who are not on eDuck, go ahead and ask questions in the comment section below.
Yeah. Or again, tweet at us.
Tweet at us.
So and we will definitely rope all those together and do our best to answer to the best of our abilities in 2 weeks. So, and that'll be August and dang near camp time. So that'll be fun. That'll be right on the heels of it.
It will be, yeah.
So, okay, well, let's wrap it up here. We'll let Heavy Heaters take you home for the 12th edition of the eDuck podcast. This is Robby Boydstun here with Erik Skopil.
Skopil out.